This is a screenshot of our isApplication sample program embedded in a web page. These parts in red on the left, the top, and the bottom are in HTML with JavaScript and CSS. And the section in blue in the middle is a COBOL application running inside of WebClient. In this video, I'll provide some details about how this is done. You'll need to be able to have your application set up to run in WebClient, and you'll need a very little bit of experience with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, or at least a good AI assistant. First, the container. Everything starts with this special div element. The key part is the data WebSwing instance attribute. It creates a container or a partition on the web page for WebClient to use. Now, this div is your placeholder for your COBOL application. You can also add some useful options for this div in your JavaScript. And some of these are auto start, that lets you delay launching until the user clicks a button. Sync clipboard lets users paste data from their computer. Auto reconnect automatically retries if the connection drops. Args passes command line arguments to your COBOL program. On the right is an example of the JavaScript var section with some of these options set. Here's what we have so far. A div in your HTML creates a container to run your program inside a web page. And the code on the screen creates a container named menu app instance. A var keyword in your JavaScript sets up some configuration for that container. Now that we have our location to run COBOL in your web page, we need to communicate with that web page, and there are three main ways to do this. One is to send an action, like a button pressed, from the JavaScript to COBOL, and then COBOL sends a response back. For example, the user might press a button to calculate an order total, and JavaScript informs WebClient, who then runs the COBOL program to calculate the answer, and then sends the JavaScript the total, and JavaScript will display it. Now, this communication is done in your COBOL program through a structure called IWC-struct. Here's a description of it. And the actions that you can use in the IWC action is IWC$init, which opens the communication, IWC$get to check for messages, IWC$send to send messages back, and IWC$stop ends the communication. When COBOL sends an action, JavaScript uses a global variable assigned to data WebSwing global var, and that will carry those actions out. So here are the functions available to that global object. We have start, and this will launch the app when you previously set auto start to false. Log out, which ends the session cleanly. The user can log back in. Disconnect, it's like pausing. The connection closes, but the app is still running on the server, so you can reconnect later. And kill completely stops the application. For finer control, you can block bootstrapping by setting auto start to false, and then you can activate the DOM manually. To scan, which reruns the full DOM search for data WebSwing instance attributes, and that'll pick up any new div elements that you've added dynamically to the page. And you can also start a specific div by using the bootstrap function, passing it the specific div element. And this is useful when you have multiple instances. There are several functions to give you information about the connection as well. Now, these functions include a way to change your configuration, the power to enable or disable input, the ability to get information about the instance ID or the connection details, and a function to refresh the screen. Here's an example of code to delay the start of your app and apply an event listener to catch the user clicking on the button. And this will cause JavaScript to start the program. And this is JavaScript code to execute when the button is clicked. In this case, it will send COBOL a message through IWC$get to run the chosen program. A second way to communicate between isCOBOL and the web browser is to embed a web component, for instance, a map of office locations. And then you'll let JavaScript draw the component and handle the user interaction. It will notify isCOBOL that the user has taken an action, for instance, clicked on the map, And then the COBOL program can do something like pop up a window with details about the office clicked on. We're going to see that in the demonstration. To embed a web component in your screen, use a control called IWC PANEL. It's a container type of control, and it creates a panel inside of your COBOL application. Now you can add this to your main code, and it's going to be ignored in Thin Client or Fat Client. For instance, the code here would be used for our map sample that I was talking about earlier. Here's an example of the JavaScript code that would create a map component in our IWC panel. And on the right, how to handle a message from the COBOL program to add a marker to the map. And this is how the JavaScript sends notice to the COBOL program that the user has clicked on an office location. And on the COBOL side, here's how the COBOL code looks to assemble the data to send for a marker on the map. The third communication type is to just pass data back and forth using JSON. This data could be a picture, for instance, to attach to a human resources file. Or it could be information that the COBOL program sends to the user, maybe a report or an invoice or a CSV export of some data. So in the case of a photo, the user would upload an employee photo and give some information about that photo, and the JavaScript would facilitate that, get that information. And then it will send the photo and the extra information to the COBOL program. On the COBOL side, you're going to use IWC $get to get that photo. So those are the three main communication ways between the JavaScript and your COBOL program. Now, once you have your HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and any other files that you need, you put them in a folder. And then you put that folder's location and the name in the web folder field right here when you're setting up your application in the web client. I want to talk for a minute about calling one program from another program. You have two options. The first is the method that we've been talking about. It requires some code changes, but the result is better performance. Using a div container launches programs started with call run in a separate thread, but in the same JVM. You'll need to call IWC $get to capture the messages from JavaScript. The alternate method is to use iframe containers instead of div containers. There's a lot less code, sometimes no code changes involved, but performance needs to be analyzed because each program is started in a new container with a new JVM. Now, there are examples of each of these methods in the samples WebClient encapsulated folder, and we're going to look at them in a few minutes. One way to improve performance is to pre-start your JVMs. This is done in the WebClient application setup in idle instances. As users connect, they will be assigned one of the already running JVMs, and another one will be queued up. And this cuts down on that bit of time that it takes for the JVM to first start up. So let's jump right in. I have several examples to show you. They're going to start from the simplest to the more complex. So we'll start with our sample folder is samples. And if you open the README, there's a section on how to run the is samples embedded. So that's what we're going to do. Remember, to run it in WebClient, first you have to be able to run it in Thin Client. So we'll start the server here. And I have two WebClient command prompts here. And I'm going to start WebClient in one of them, again in the foreground, and WebClient admin in the other. And let's go into the is samples folder and see what we're going to run. Under Files is a WebClient folder, and it contains just a small JavaScript and HTML pages. So let's open up the administrative panel and set this up. Log in as admin and admin. And I have already set up the samples. Let's take a look at it. And under the web configuration, here is the web folder that we just looked at with the JavaScript and the HTML in it. And then the app configuration just has the word samples in here. I haven't changed anything else. So we'll run it. And notice that first we see this bar up here. That is the HTML. And then this is samples embedded inside of the HTML. So let's look at the IWC structure and how that works. I'm going to hit a Control F and type in IWC, and we'll look at the IWC structure here under Library Routines. So this start will do an IWC $init. This sample converts a uppercase string to a lowercase string. So we'll type in something. This is a test, and we'll send it with IWC send. And we get the message back in lowercase with IWC get. And then when we stop the communication, it's IWC stop. So this is a great program to see how these 4 functions work. And as all of our samples, you can view the source here. All right, so let's look at the panel now and see how that works. I'm going to run the program up here. It's also in our new features under 2021 R2. And here's the map sample that I talked about in my slides. And if you click on one of them, let's click on the office here in San Diego. You can see how the JavaScript sent a message to the COBOL program, and it sent back the coordinates, and the JavaScript handled everything that was inside of this control, which is the IWC panel. Okay, our next sample is in the Modernization folder. And in this folder, we've taken a character program and put it through several different iterations of upgrading it. And in the last one, we have WebClient. We have an encapsulated or embedded sample here. And it's a little bit more involved. Many of the programs have not been changed, just some programs have been added, like IWC Hotkey and WC Win Handler, that kind of thing. But it still has the HTML with JavaScript and CSS. So we're going to run this one embedded. And I'm going to start the server here for my thin client connection. And we'll go to our administrative panel, and I've already set it up with this name. And the folder that we saw the JavaScript and the HTML in is right there. And I set it up normally as you would any web client, and we'll run it. So here's the modernization sample, and it has 2 programs, customer and state. There's a record in customer. We'll click on state. And there's our first state. So there's another example for you. Now I have a third example. And that is in sample under web client and under encapsulated. And like the others, we have an HTML folder. And it contains both examples for div and iframe containers. And each of these has JavaScript, CSS, HTML, any other files that are needed for the distribution. And I have a batch script that does what the README tells me to do, so I'm just going to use it to start the web client. And I don't have to restart the admin. Let's go on and take a look at how that's set up. So we'll first look at the one that uses a div, and that's this single process menu. Remember, it just uses one JVM. And here's the web folder for the div. And under app configuration, we have our application, and we're passing it the user's name. I'll run that. And here is the web page. Now, I haven't run a COBOL program yet. So this is all JavaScript and HTML. And I want to look at, in my task manager, at how many Java processes I start up. So I'm going to start the customer. And we're still inside the original Java process. We'll start products. Still one Java. So these separate COBOL programs are running as separate threads, but inside the same JVM. And the startup of a JVM takes a while, so that's an important difference. Each program is using the IWC status fields to talk back and forth to the JavaScript. For instance, if I bring up the first customer, which is our office here in San Diego, and I click on Show on Map, Here's an IWC panel in a pop-up window, and it's run very similar to the map example that we saw before. So that is the option using a div. Let's log out. We'll go to the other option. It's called Sample Menu, and let's start that. And we'll look at our task manager. We just have one Java service. But let's run customer. And look at our Java processes. Now we have two. So you see it did start up a new JVM. We'll start products, and I'll start the users as well. And by my count, we should have 4 Java instances, and we do. So I've shown you 4 things in our samples folders. isSample is encapsulated inside of a simple HTML page. The modernization sample encapsulated in a web page as well. And then the 2 samples here, the sample menu and the menu run, and also the sample programs to show you how to use the IWC structure in your program and how to use the IWC panel. And that's a quick look at how to embed your COBOL application in an existing or new web page. I hope you give it a try. If you have any questions, you can reach us at the information on the screen or at support@veryant.com. Thank you.